You think you know what power looks like. You look at the market cap of Apple or Amazon, you see trillions of dollars, and you think that is the top of the food chain. You are wrong. Modern corporations are spoiled brats playing in a sandbox under the supervision of regulators. True power doesn't scream about itself at gadget launch events. True power is when your board of directors has the legal right to declare war, mint its own currency, and execute people without trial. Welcome to the year 1600. Welcome to the world that birthed the concept ruling you today. The name of this monster was the British East India Company, or, as contemporaries whispered with reverent terror, John Company. This was the first BlackRock, but instead of trading algorithms, they had cannons. Instead of managing your 401k, they managed an entire continent. History loves to repeat itself, only this time it has swapped muskets for debt notes and sailing ships for fiber optic cables. But the appetite remains exactly the same. Let's talk about the math of risk. It's boring, right? But this boredom rules the world. Before the 17th century, business was personal and deadly. If you were a merchant and your ship sank or was taken by pirates, you didn't just lose the cargo, you were bankrupt. Creditors took your house, your furniture, your clothes. You went to a debtor's prison where you would likely die. The risk was personal. You had skin in the game. But in 1600, a group of London merchants came up with a genius trick. The greatest magic trick in the history of finance, the foundation of the modern economy. They invented limited liability. The essence is obscenely simple. If we win, we split the profits. If we lose, we only lose the coin we threw into the pot. Nothing more. No one comes for our mansion. No one puts us in prison. They separated profit from responsibility. Imagine this on a household level. Let's say you take out a mortgage. If you stop paying, the bank takes your house and throws you on the street. That is the old model, the model of total responsibility. Now imagine you act like a corporation. You take a loan, buy a house, turn it into a meth lab, and it explodes, burning down half the neighborhood. The police arrive and you shrug and say, "Sorry, I'm just a shareholder of this house. I lost my $10 down payment, but I'm not responsible for the fire or the bodies." And the scariest part? The law agrees with you. This principle untied the hands of the East India Company. When risk is capped, but potential profit is infinite, morality becomes an unnecessary variable in the equation. It interferes with efficiency. At first, they just traded spices, textiles, tea. But very quickly, the directors in London realized one important thing. Honest trade is hard. You have to negotiate, compete, lower prices. Monopoly is much more lucrative. And the most reliable way to secure a monopoly is violence. By the mid-18th century, the East India Company ceased to be a trading firm. It transformed into a sovereign chimera state. They had their own army. Think about these numbers. 260,000 soldiers. That was twice the size of the official British Empire's army at the time. A private corporation possessed firepower capable of wiping most European countries off the face of the earth. Try to translate this to today's reality to understand the scale of the insanity. Imagine you order a package on Amazon, but instead of a delivery driver, a tank with a smiling arrow logo rolls up to your driveway. Armed mercenaries of Jeff Bezos step out. They didn't bring your order. They came to inform you that your garage now belongs to Amazon because the shareholders decided it was necessary for logistics optimization. And you can't call the police because the police in your town are working on a subcontract for Amazon too. The local court is bought, and the mayor is on the corporation's payroll as a consultant. Sound like dystopian fiction? For the people of Bengal in the 18th century, this was daily reality. The corporation didn't just trade, it collected taxes, it judged, it decided who lived and who died. And all of this for one single goal: annual returns. The climax of this cannibalistic efficiency was the year 1770. A drought hit Bengal. The crops failed. What does a normal state do in this situation? It opens the granaries, distributes grain, lowers taxes, bans the export of food. Because people are a valuable resource. They need to be preserved. The state needs living subjects. What does the corporation do? The corporation looks at the balance sheet and sees a drop in revenue due to the bad harvest. The board of directors in London, sitting in cozy mahogany-paneled offices, makes a decision. To compensate for the losses, they must raise taxes. In the middle of a famine, the company increased the tax rate by 10%. Moreover, they banned people from hoarding rice, forcibly buying it up to resell at speculative prices. The result of this effective management strategy was 10 million corpses. 1/3 of the population of Bengal died. People ate grass, tree bark, and eventually each other. The streets of Calcutta were piled with bodies that no one had the strength to remove. But do you know what was happening in London at that time? The company's stock went up. Dividends were paid on time, and they were record-breaking. Shareholders drank tea grown on blood and discussed how well their investment portfolio was performing. They weren't sadists. They didn't want to kill people on purpose. They just didn't care. There was no column for human suffering in their ledgers. There was only revenue and expenses. The local population shifted from the category of labor force to the category of excess overhead, and overhead must be cut. This was the first brutal lesson the world had to learn. Capital has no homeland, capital has no conscience, and capital has no saturation point. When a corporation becomes too big to fail, it begins to devour the state that created it. Eventually, the British government got scared. Not of the humanitarian catastrophe, no. They were scared that the company had become stronger than the crown. The East India Company started buying members of parliament in bulk. These were called rotten boroughs. Nabobs, newly rich company employees, returned to England and bought seats in government to lobby for the corporation's interests. The state realized, it's either us or them. In the 19th century, the company was nationalized and dissolved. It seemed the dragon was slain. History was over. But that was an illusion. Capital simply shed its old skin. It realized that brute force is expensive and inefficient. Why maintain an army, feed soldiers, build forts, and suppress rebellions? These are huge operating expenses that cut into margins. Bullets cost money. Dead slaves don't generate profit. Evolution moved on. The financial elites realized, to own the world, you don't need to occupy it. You don't need to plant a flag on foreign soil. You just need to occupy the financial flows. Why own the plantation and the overseers if you can own the debt of the plantation owner? And here we transport to the 21st century. The muskets have rusted and gone to museums. The rough colonizers have been replaced by quiet analysts in gray suits. The East India Company has been replaced by a new hegemon, the Big Three, a triad you've likely heard of, but whose scale of influence you can't even imagine. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They learned the lessons of their predecessors. They became invisible. BlackRock has no army. They have no prisons. Formally, they don't own anything at all. Ask Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. Whose $10 trillion is this? He will smile and say, it's not our money, it's our clients' money. We are just asset managers. This is the greatest lie of our time. And to understand how it works, we need to disassemble the mechanics of modern power, which has become far more totalitarian than any British colonel with a saber in the 18th century. The secret of their might lies in a boring term, horizontal ownership. It is the invisible noose that cannot be seen with the naked eye. You walk into a supermarket. Before you are shelves bursting with goods. You see Coca-Cola and Pepsi. You see them fighting for your attention with bright labels and Super Bowl commercials. You think this is the market. You think this is competition. You think your choice of a soda can decide who wins the war. This is an illusion. The most expensive stage set in the world. Open the shareholder registries. Who is the largest owner of Coca-Cola? A group consisting of BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And who owns Pepsi? The exact same names. Who owns the airlines? Who holds the pharmaceuticals, the banks, the media conglomerates? Everywhere, it is the same big three. Imagine you go to a racetrack to place a bet. In the old days, the East India Company would bet on one horse and try to poison or shoot all the others at the starting gate. That was messy and risky. BlackRock operates differently. They simply bought the entire racetrack. They bought all the horses, all the jockeys, and even the betting booth. They don't give a damn which horse comes in first. They win in any scenario. When one master owns all the competitors in an industry, the very concept of competition dies. Why lower prices for the consumer? Why improve quality? After all, if you switch from one brand to another, money just flows from Larry Fink's left pocket to his right. This is called a monopoly, but legally, you can't touch it. Because formally, they are different companies, but in fact, they are tentacles of the same octopus. But the most brilliant invention is how they use your money against you. In the 17th century, the East India Company had to spend its own gold to bribe Rajas. BlackRock doesn't spend its own money. They use the pension savings of teachers, firefighters, doctors, and office clerks. You give them money to manage, hoping to save for retirement. But there is a nuance. The money remains yours, but the votes become theirs. By buying shares with your money, BlackRock gains the right to vote on the boards of directors of the world's largest companies. They decide who will be CEO, what strategy the company will choose, which factories to close, and which to open. It's as if you bought an apartment, paid the mortgage, but gave the voting rights at the HOA meeting to the management company. And now this company decides to turn off your heating for energy efficiency, and you can do nothing, even though the house belongs to you. They have privatized the voting rights of the entire global economy, and if the East India Company ruled its empire with bayonets and paper maps, the new empire is ruled by silicon and code. BlackRock has a weapon that makes the muskets of the past look like children's toys. It is called Aladdin. This is not a Disney character. It is the asset liability and debt and derivative investment network, a supercomputer that is arguably the most powerful artificial intelligence in the financial world. Aladdin analyzes every trade, every risk, every possible disaster on the planet. It calculates millions of scenarios daily. In the 18th century, the East India Company had a network of spies. BlackRock has Aladdin. It knows more about the global economy than the Federal Reserve, more than the European Central Bank, more than any government. Moreover, governments come to it on their knees. In 2008, when the world was hurtling into the abyss of the financial crisis, the US government was in a panic. They didn't know which banks to save and which to let drown. They didn't have the data. Who did they call? They called BlackRock. They asked a private corporation to analyze the toxic assets and tell the state what to do. Think about that moment. It was a turning point in history, comparable to when the Mughal emperor handed the East India Company the right to collect taxes. The state admitted its incompetence and handed the keys to the economy to private hands. Now, Aladdin manages risk not only for BlackRock, but for their competitors and for central banks. The system has become so complex that no one but the algorithm can understand it. And if tomorrow someone decides to pull the plug, the global economy will simply stop. This is no longer too big to fail. This is too systemic to touch. They have become the circulatory system of the world. You cannot declare war on your own blood. The East India Company was a barbarian breaking down the door with an axe. The modern corporate empire is an invisible gas that fills the room. You breathe it, you live in it, you pay it every time you swipe your card, but you cannot see it. However, the story of East India ended in collapse. Will this digital leviathan live forever? Or are they repeating the exact same mistake their pith-helmeted predecessors made? The mistake that always stands at the end of the equation. The East India Company didn't collapse because of bankruptcy. It was killed by hubris. In 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny occurred. Indian soldiers who served the corporation rebelled. It was a bloody revolt against a system that had been squeezing the country dry for decades while hiding behind a civilizing mission. The British Crown was forced to intervene, nationalize the company's assets, and take over governance. The corporation had become toxic to the state itself. Today we see the same hubris, only packaged in a glossy wrapper. The East India Company justified its atrocities by claiming to bring the light of Christianity and civilization to savages. BlackRock and their peers justify their total control with a new religion called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. They tell you, we are not just making money, we are saving the planet. We force companies to be green, inclusive, and socially responsible. Sounds beautiful, right? But in the language of finance, this means something entirely different. ESG is the perfect tool for control. If a company or a country behaves incorrectly, doesn't obey the general agenda, doesn't implement the necessary quotas, argues with the party line, the investment tap is turned off. Its rating falls. Its stock crashes. This isn't ecology, this is power. It is a way to tell any CEO in the world, kiss the ring or your business dies. It is the same colonial administration, only instead of a governor in a colonial uniform, you receive a notification about a credit rating downgrade. But this is where their fatal error lies. The same error that destroyed their ancestors. They believed that with math and coercion, the human factor could be completely eliminated. They believed that Aladdin could predict the future. But algorithms are trained on the past. They work perfectly in a stable world, but they are blind to chaos. The tighter they compress the spring of control, trying to regulate everything, from the temperature in your home to the composition of an oil company's board, the stronger the recoil will be. The world is becoming too complex to manage from a single office in Manhattan. We see dissatisfaction growing. We see U.S. states beginning to withdraw their pension funds from BlackRock's management. We see people starting to ask questions. History teaches us one thing. When a corporation becomes more powerful than the state, it inevitably begins to devour that state. And at that moment, symbiosis turns into cannibalism. Either the state wakes up and breaks up the monster, as they did with East India, or the monster finally swallows the state, turning the government into its PR department. We are living in a unique time. We are seeing the rebirth of an empire that has no borders. But this empire has a vulnerability. It rests on our silent consent, on our laziness, on the fact that we give them our money and our votes because we are too lazy to read financial reports. The East India Company owned India for 250 years. The current financial oligarchy has ruled the world for only a couple of decades. Their power seems absolute, but it is a colossus with feet of clay, and those feet are made of our pension contributions. In the 17th century, they stole responsibility from us. In the 21st century, they are trying to steal our future, turning it into a predictable line of revenue. But the market, like history, does not forgive monopolies. Sooner or later, the black swan will arrive, and no supercomputer will be able to stop it. The only question is, whose side will you be on when this house of cards begins to fold? Stop being a passive passenger on their ship. Learn where your money is going. Because in the world of financial noir, ignorance is not just darkness, it is poverty.